Our next speaker today is Greg. Greg is starting a new brand pathway today. Well done, Greg. Engaging humor. We each have developed our own personal sense of humor over our lifetimes, and it's often listed as one of the most important character traits for true and lasting relationships and connections. Whether shared with friends, romantic partners, family, etc., a common sense of humor can bring us together over laughter in a way that nothing else can. Greg is here today to share a few of his favorite humorous movies and TV shows. He's better, he's betting that you'll like some of these too. Please help me welcome Greg Lou, things that make you go lol. Greg Lou.
Thank you, Amanda. When we talk about sense of humor, you often say, why do I have the sense of humor I have? Or how did I get it? And why is it here? How do we use it? And I'll leave you with a couple thoughts about that at the end of this. But first, I think my opinion is that it's a symbiosis of personality, experiences, life, who's there, who's not. And a lot of it is what we see on television or the movie screen. So I'd like to share some of those with you today. Before I go into the movies, though, the absolute earliest memory I have of humor and laughter is my mom. As most of us, when we're very young, before we get to see a lot of TV or know what shows or movies we like, your parents are there. So mom always had what I thought was a really good sense of humor. Over board games or cards with family and friends, we'd do wordplay and we'd make jokes and we'd crack puns and words with multiple meanings. So I really started in developing my sense of humor in that way. Now, having said that, as I got into elementary school or stuff, and we had Saturday morning cartoons, I watched Scooby-Doo and Roadrunner and Pink Panther and some of those other cartoons. As I got a little bit older, some of the older black and white TV shows like the Three Stooges, a lot of physical humor and slapstick, and I wasn't so thrilled with that. It was all right, but not really my thing. Abbott and Costello had a Who's on First routine, if any of you remember that. It was physical, but it had dialogue, and it was the first comedy routine I actually remember liking. And then as I got into my teenage years, now I start getting into watching movies. So different genres like British romantic comedy, the Bedazzled, uh, American romantic comedy, The Jerk, which I consider a romantic comedy. It's about a relationship. At the time, there were a lot of medieval knights and sorcery movies out. So you had Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Before me, there were American Westerns. So, of course, Blazing Saddles, a lot of horror movies at that time, like monster movies, Werewolf, Frankenstein. So the comedy movies like Young Frankenstein, Man with Two Brains. Now, if you've ever seen Man of Two Brains, that's probably my quirkiest and least known movie in this whole list. So if you've seen that, we should talk later. You're my kind of people. So then disaster movies at that time were big. The Towering Inferno, the Poseidon Adventure. So the comedy version of that was Airplane. And then in my 20s and 30s, a lot of the sci-fi came to the front. Star Wars. So we had Spaceballs, and we had Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy were movies that came out. And we had a romance and adventure like The Princess Bride, one of my all-time favorite funny, quotable movies. We had courtroom movies like My Cousin Vinny, more romantic comedies like Groundhog Day, and they actually redid Bedazzled in 2000 with Brendan Fraser. I thought they really did a good job with that. Horror movies like Scary Movie and Shaun of the Dead for zombie apocalypse and those type of movies. And then we got into a lot of the comedy about adult relationships as I got a little bit older. So like stand-up comedians, they would talk about relationships, men, women, friends, whatever. Steve Martin, Joan Rivers, Elaine Boozler, Robin Williams, Eddie Murphy. These were all a lot of the big comedians at that time. And then as I got into my 40s and 50s, I started appreciating political comedy and satire a little more. And especially the old Saturday Night Live skits where they would do the president, they would imitate presidents. So Chevy Chase used to do Gerald Ford. Dana Carvey used to do George Bush. Daryl Hammond imitated Bill Clinton. Where Will Ferrell did George W. Bush, and more recently, Alec Baldwin imitated Donald Trump. And these were all pretty hilarious. So I am 60 now, just turned 60. And if you remember, I started this out with my mom. My mom was the first earliest memory of humor to me, and she passed away this last year at 80. But before she passed, she and I had had many conversations about the recent cancel culture, that fear of speaking out or being able to make jokes, the retribution and the canceling of those who actually used humor to try to call out the absurdities of some of these things. So I believe that humor exists to balance things like the heartache of romantic attempts. So you have romantic comedies, unjust legal systems. So you have courtroom comedies making fun of the ridiculousness of the judicial system. You have actual fear, whether it's zombie apocalypse or disaster movies. So you have spoofs of those. You have political turmoil and uncertainty. So you have stand-up and sketch comedy to call out just the, all the ridiculousness and the things in those. So these are all valid human issues that need to be challenged. And none of this can be solved with humor, but they can certainly be discussed over humor. And I think humor has the power to heal. So in conclusion, I wish for all of us that these upcoming years bring us even more humor than the years we've had up till now. And I leave you today with this quote from funny man John Cleese. He said, "Laughter connects you with people. It's almost impossible to maintain any kind of distance or sense of social hierarchy when you're all just howling with laughter together. Laughter is a force for democracy." I believe that, and I hope you do too. But I'm Toastmaster.
Thank you so much for that speech, Greg.